we're going to make sweet rolls, and I'm going to start out with 1.5 pounds of beautiful bread dough as always. And you can use for this recipe the standard bread dough that we've been using for all the other recipes up to this point, the whole wheat oatmeal dough. You can use, in my book, I also have a recipe for the 100% whole wheat dough that uses honey. And then there's also a recipe in there for sweetbreads like cinnamon rolls or donuts. And that calls for some soft wheat flour in addition to the hard wheat flour. The soft wheat is the blending flour, the hard wheat is the base flour. And it also contains milk and eggs and some melted butter. So you can use that dough. It's called an enriched dough. Whenever you add milk and eggs to a dough and extra sugar, it's called an enriched dough. So you could use that for your starter dough if you would like to, or if you're already making bread dough and loaf breads, you could just snatch one of the loaf portions out and make a little batch of cinnamon rolls, which is what I usually do. So to get started, we need to roll out the dough into a rectangle shape. So we're looking for about a 12 by 16 approximately. And whenever you're rolling, if it just seems like it doesn't want to work with you very well, if you roll it flat and it just immediately springs back, that means that you need to let it rest for a couple of minutes. So cover it up and cover it loosely with some plastic or a piece of parchment paper and let it rest for 5-10 minutes or so. That will help the gluten to relax. And then when you come back to roll it, it'll be a little bit softer and more pliable again, and it won't fight you when you're trying to roll it out. Okay, so I've got 12 by 16 here. And next I'm going to take a little bit of melted butter. Actually, it's softened, it's not really melted, but you could brush on some melted butter if you wanted to. This is about 1/3 of a stick of butter. And just spread that on. Now sometimes I don't even put any butter on there. You know, I want to leave an edge at the top where there's nothing on it. And usually I forget, and I almost forgot this time. If you do, it's no big problem. It'll just be a little bit harder to seal up, but it'll still taste terrific. So you can put as much butter here as you would like, whatever seems appropriate to you, or as I say, you can even leave out the butter. All right, next I've got some cinnamon and brown sugar mixed together here. You could use sucanat if you wanted to instead of the brown sugar. Sucanat, of course, sugarcane natural. And you're just gonna basically sprinkle that all over the dough. You can use, again, as much or as little as you like, according to your taste. And remember, we talked about when we were making the cinnamon swirl bread that you need more cinnamon per amount of sugar than you're probably used to using. And that's because the whole wheat has a lot of flavor on its own, and the cinnamon can kind of get lost in there, the flavor of it. So I use between 3 and 4 tablespoons of cinnamon, ground cinnamon, per cup of sugar. So if I wanted to, now I'm not putting all of that on here, but if I wanted to mix up a small batch, that's about the proportions that I would use. Now I've got my cinnamon sugar on here. You could put on some raisins if you like, some nuts. I'm just going to leave these plain because that's kind of the way my family prefers them. And then we're just going to start rolling from the long side. All the way up to the top. If you have problems with this sticking, take a spatula or a bench knife and kind of scrape it up as you go. Okay, now when we get to the part where we don't have any filling, we'll just lift that up and pinch that all closed. Now my roll came out pretty uniform, but sometimes you'll get a big thick spot in the middle here, like a big hump, and then it kind of tapers off towards the end. Well, that means the people who get the end pieces don't get as much goodie in there. So what we want to do is kind of shore that up. If you need to, you can kind of pull out from the center and just manipulate this dough. Just make it the way you want it to be and don't let it push you around. You're in charge of the way the dough looks and the way the cinnamon rolls are shaped. So you just even it out there to where it's nice and uniform, and all of your rolls will be the same size and have the same amount of good filling inside. Okay, once that's all formed the way you like it, you can start to slice them. Now, some people like to use dental floss to cut theirs with. I just like to use a serrated knife because I think that makes it pretty easy. Now I've got about a 16-inch log here. You can make these any size you want. You can make smaller cinnamon rolls. I tend to make them a little bit larger because that way I can fit more of them in my oven at a time. So I'm just going to kind of mark about where the center is here, and then I'll just keep going and having it on each side, and that way they will come out about even. So about half of this one then, and then about half of this one. And about half of this one. Okay. Now then, take our pan prepared with parchment paper, or you can grease it liberally. And here's our beautiful roll with the filling all inside. Take this on the pan, and now I like to kind of squash it down if it's really tall like that. If you made them much thinner, then you probably wouldn't need to do that. But I like to squash them down so they're nice and round. Also so that they don't kind of topple over when they're baking. Okay, so they look about like that. Now if you want them to be brown all around the outsides, put at least 2, maybe 3 fingers within there if you've got room on your pan. If you put them pretty close together like this one, then they're going to grow together and touch. So it depends on how you like yours. Like them a little crisper on the outside, or if you like them all to smush together and be really soft. Okay, these are ready to rise now, so I'm just going to cover those. And while these are rising or baking, you can put together your glaze if you're using it. Here's what the rolls look like after they have risen. And one thing that I should mention is if you wanted to make these the night before and then bake them fresh in the morning for breakfast, directly after you form these, before you let them rise like this, go ahead and cover them with some plastic wrap loosely and put them into the refrigerator, and then in the morning you can take them out and let them come up to room temperature, and they'll rise as they do so, and then you can bake them. And that way you can save a little time in the morning if you would like to. Well, the cinnamon rolls are baked. It took about 25 minutes for rolls this size at 350, and they're still cooling, and I'm going to make the glaze to go on top of them. This will be a vanilla glaze, and so I'm starting out with some melted butter, some powdered sugar, a little bit of milk, and some vanilla. So I'll just dump the powdered sugar into the butter and whisk it around a little bit. Adding just enough of the milk to get the right consistency, so we may not need it all. And I'll go ahead and put the vanilla in too. Okay, the icing is nice consistency. And we'll just kind of start pouring some on or drizzling some on. This is really enough icing for a couple of batches of rolls, so you could make a smaller amount if you just have one batch. Okay, and here's what they look like when they're all frosted and ready to eat. If you want your frosting to look clear when it sets, you'll use water instead of the milk, and using the milk makes them look white and opaque like this. So there you go, classic cinnamon rolls with vanilla glaze. Now I want to show you a variation on the classic cinnamon rolls, which is orange rolls. And instead of the cinnamon, we're just going to substitute some fresh orange zest. Now the way I like to do it is, as we're eating oranges throughout the month, I take the peel and I grate off the zest, just the thin outer layer of the orange, and then I add it to a little container like this until I get enough to do something with. And then when this starts to get full, then I know it's time to bake something delicious with orange in it. So I would just keep this in my freezer. I do the same with lemons, with lime, so I always have some fresh zest available. Now all I'm going to do is add this to the brown sugar and stir it around. I've already rolled out the dough the way that it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and add the butter. Okay, so we have our orange and brown sugar mixture all stirred up. Now when I put the butter on, I left about a 2-inch or so margin up here, and that's because the orange and sugar mixture kind of gets a little more liquidy than the cinnamon and brown sugar does. So I'm going to show you kind of a little trick for rolling these up a little bit differently than last time. I'm going to roll these up just like before, but I'm not going to roll them all the way to the edge like I did last time. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to kind of shore this up on the end there where it's wanting to kind of poke out. I've got a fairly uniform cylinder here. Now I left this little 2-inch tail or so. I'm going to go ahead and cut these, and that's because, like I said, this mixture wants to leak out a little bit more, and there's other recipes that you might make with fillings that are very fruity or creamy, and this works for them as well. What you're going to do is go ahead and cut it this way. So I'm going to pick just about halfway here. Okay, now I'm going to pick this up, and instead of rolling this over like that like we would normally do, just to kind of help some of this filling stay in there, I'm going to make sort of like a little floor for that filling, just to help it not to leak out so much. And it might still leak out a little bit, but it'll work a little bit better. If you use granulated sugar instead of brown sugar, it wants to fall out even more, it seems like. So now, instead, I've got my swirl on one side, and then on the bottom here where nobody's going to see it, it's a little bit more contained. Now, just in case, I also went ahead and prepared a pan like this instead of a sheet pan in case it leaks even more. I didn't have just a ton of filling in there, so this will probably be fine. But if you were making another kind of recipe where, well, my chocolate one, for example, I have a chocolate filling that I like to make sweet rolls with as well, and it really likes to to leak out and get all gooey on the bottom. So just kind of tuck that extra little piece underneath. I'm going to squash them down a little bit again. And then you'll just continue doing that. Just kind of pull that over the bottom and pinch it closed. Continue doing that for each one. And here's what the finished rolls look like. We'll let these rise as usual. And then we'll bake. All right, here are the finished orange rolls. They look lovely. And now we're gonna make the glaze for them. Got some powdered sugar and an orange and some melted butter. And the first thing I wanna do is grate a little of this zest off the orange. I'm gonna swirl that around in the butter a little bit there. And pour that over the sugar. Now I'm going to squeeze some of the juice. Okay, this looks about the right consistency. It'll melt a little bit when we put it on the warm cinnamon rolls. Orange rolls, I mean. Okay. All right, so there's your Rise and Shine orange rolls. That'll get the family out of bed in the morning.